Hey everybody, Qroo here. Got a cup of coffee to start my day, a little bit of time. Thought I would do a video for you on one of my favorite verbs. It's actually a mega verb, but people don't think of it that way, and it is llegar, to arrive. And normally when we say mega verb, we're talking about verbs that are used in so many different ways that you absolutely have to know them to speak Spanish well. You know, our list there is like ser, to be, estar, to be, tener, to have. But llegar is like their first cousin sitting over there. It's like, I'm pretty important, but nobody pays attention to. But it's important. This video was inspired by a question that I received from a member of my private learning group, the Qroo Spanish Crew. He noticed one of the usages of llegar that was not expected, and he was like, hey, is there more to this verb? And I was like, oh yeah, there is. So here we have a video. Let's start with the very common usage of llegar. It means to arrive. And I always tell people to learn verbs with their preposition so you know how to use them. You know, you don't forget the preposition. And with this one, it's going to be llegar a. You arrive to a place. Now, normally when I teach a student the verb llegar, they're like, okay, arrive. How many times do I say arrive in my life? The plane arrives? El avión llega? Doesn't seem that useful, Paul. Think of it this way. A lot of times in English, we're not using the word arrive. We're saying get. What time did you get home? What time did you get to the office? That type of get. We're going to be using llegar. ¿A qué hora llegaste a la oficina? What time did you get to the office? ¿A qué hora llegaste a casa? What time did you get home? So when you're thinking of your English, when did somebody get to a place? Start thinking llegar a. Now, before I move on, I just want to point out some differences in pronunciation because I'm really guilty of pronouncing my double L's sometimes like a Y and sometimes like a J. When you take a typical Spanish course and you're learning pronunciation, you're probably being taught that the double L sounds like a Y in English. Llegar, llegar. And it is pronounced that way in a lot of, the Spanish-speaking world. But as you travel around through parts of Latin America, or you start gabbing with people to practice your Spanish, you're likely to come across folks who are pronouncing it more like a soft J. Llegar, llegar. They're both correct. It really just depends where you're at regionally. Now, if you work your way down through South America and you end up down in Argentina, Uruguay, that double L may sound like a sh, llegar, llegar. Whichever one you want to use, just be you. Now that we have pronunciation out of the way, let's get back into the different usages of llegar. And on the top of the list here is one you may not expect that I think is super useful. That's why I put on the top of the list, because I know people don't watch these videos to the end. And it is llegar a plus infinitive. And it means like to arrive at doing something, to manage to do something. Some people put it as to end up doing something, but there are some other ways to say that in Spanish. We're talking about something that you eventually reached a certain state or outcome. This one is particularly useful. And if you notice there, I'm breaking it down into a formula. Put that on your word list like that. Llegar a plus infinitive. Después de muchos años, llegó a ser presidente. After many years, he became president. Literally, he arrived at being president. I find it very helpful to remember Spanish phrases like this literally in English in my head so I don't forget them. He arrived at being president. Llegó a ser presidente. Con el tiempo, llegarás a entenderlo. Over time or with time, you'll come to understand it. You'll arrive at understanding it. See, that one's in the future tense. Don't forget that a. Remember, that's our pattern. That's our formula. Llegar a plus infinitive. Si sigues entrenando, llegarás a correr un maratón. If you keep training, you'll eventually run a marathon. You'll arrive at running a marathon, right? You'll achieve that. You'll run a marathon. I know I'm putting it so many different ways in English. Just one of those will stick with folks. One will resonate with this person or something with somebody else. So I throw them all out there. That brings us to our next usage of llegar, and that is to receive, as in messages, calls, packages. In Spanish, llegar is commonly used to talk about receiving things like this, whereas English speakers, we tend to try to use the verb recibir when we're learning Spanish. Let's look at some examples. Me llegaron dos mensajes de texto. I got 2 text messages. I received 2 text messages, but literally, 2 text messages arrived to me. See, we have our indirect object pronoun, me, right up there, and it's showing it's coming to me. Me llegaron dos mensajes de texto. We received a package from Mexico. Nos llegó un paquete de México. See, llegar. And we have nos to show that we received it. Nos llegó un paquete de México. Our next usage of llegar is to reach a certain amount or level. We're going to be using this with numbers typically. El video llegó a 1,000,000 de vistas. The video reached 1,000,000 views. It arrived at 1,000,000 views. It achieved 1,000,000 views. However this is sticking in your head. Mi abuelo llegó a los 90 años. My grandfather made it to 90 years of age. He arrived at 90 years of age. He achieved 90 years of age. El precio llegó a los $50. The price reached $50. It arrived at $50. I really still think the best way is just that literal translation in your head when I'm thinking of things arriving, at $50, or that messages arrived to me. That works for me. Our next use of llegar is to extend to cover a distance, and you're going to see this one a lot with the word hasta, which can mean until or up until. Think of it that way. El agua llegó hasta la puerta. The water reached the door. It arrived until the door or up until the door. However, that's, helping you remember that. La fila llega hasta la esquina. The line goes all the way to the corner. But literally, the line arrives hasta la esquina, up until the corner. Our next usage of llegar is to have an impact, meaning emotionally, generally. This is often used with something attached to llegar, like llegar al corazón, to arrive to the heart. Sus palabras me llegaron al corazón. His words moved me, impacted me, but literally arrived to my heart. And I know that sounds really awkward in English. There are other ways to say that something moved you. One of the verbs is conmover. That's really useful, but we're not talking about conmover, we're talking about llegar, right? So this is a way that you can do that. In addition to al corazón, another way is muy adentro. Sus palabras me llegaron muy adentro, like very inside. His words really touched me, really moved me. And sometimes you'll see llegar used this way as an emotional impact, but without al corazón and without muy adentro. Here's an example. Esa película me llegó mucho. That movie really got to me. It really impacted me. Our next usage of llegar is to be enough, to be sufficient. And we're going to be using this one with the word para. No me llegue el dinero para comprarlo. I don't have enough money to buy it, but literally, the money doesn't arrive to me to buy it. Para comprarlo, that's showing our purpose in order to buy it. Con esto no llega para todos. With this, what we have here, it's not enough for everyone, but literally, con esto, with this, no llega para todos. It doesn't arrive for everyone. It's not enough. Now, are there other ways to say this in Spanish? Yeah, you can just use those words like, no tenemos suficiente dinero. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. You can use quedar. There's a ton of different ways. But we're not talking about those ways. We're talking about llegar. Personally, do I think this particular usage is super useful? It's okay. I think you should recognize it when you see it, even if you don't use it yourself. The next usage we have of llegar is in a set expression, llegar tan lejos. It means to get so far or come so far. If you're saying either one of those in English, this is a great one to pop in. Nadie imaginaba que Sofía llegaría tan lejos en su carrera. No one imagined that Sofía would get so far in her career or would come so far in her career. Personally, I knew she would because Sofía is incredible. I'm just saying. Here's another example. Es increíble que la tecnología haya llegado tan lejos en tan poco tiempo. It's incredible that technology has come so far in such a short period of time. Now, there's a lot going on in that sentence that I want to address. I don't want to go down a long rabbit hole, but I think it's important, all right? Right up there in front, you have es increíble que, which is a subjunctive trigger. If you don't know what the subjunctive is, you really need to because it is the keystone of learning Spanish. Think of the subjunctive this way. The subjunctive is simply another set of conjugations that are triggered by certain grammatical constructions. So when you see that construction, you know to use this new conjugation. And this is one of them. Es increíble que, it's incredible that what? La tecnología haya llegado tan lejos, that technology has come so far. And right there you have haya, and that's in the subjunctive. I just had to point that out because I think it's that useful. Oh, the other thing I want to point out too is that we have la tecnología. We're using the definite article there. We're saying the technology. When we're talking about something as a whole in Spanish, we're going to be using those definite articles. That's different than English. We don't do that. We say technology is advancing. They say the technology is advancing. All right, let me get back out of the rabbit hole and get back on topic. That was pretty quick though. I'm getting better at this. I didn't spend a lot of time down there. Our next usage of llegar is going to look very similar to that construction I gave you way at the beginning, but with a slightly different meaning. It's going to be llegar a plus infinitive. And it's going to mean to go as far as, like, oh, he went as far as doing this. He arrived at doing this. And it's all context, you know, which one we're talking about. En la discusión, Mario llegó a insultar a su jefe. In the argument, Mario even went as far as insulting his boss. You know, but in the Spanish, it's like, in the argument, Mario arrived at insulting his boss. I mean, he even did that. Can you believe that? Oof. Now, before I end this video, I just want to cover a few other expressions that just use llegar because there are so many of them. But I'm just going to give you three more that I think are pretty useful. And here they are. Llegar a golpes, to come to blows, to arrive at blows. A golpe is like a punch, a blow. Los candidatos llegaron a golpes. The candidates came to blows. Wow, that's a rough election, huh? Next one is llegar al fondo de algo, to get to the bottom of something. Tenemos que llegar al fondo de todo esto. We have to get to the bottom of all this. I think that one's pretty useful. And the last one I'm going to cover today is llegar a un acuerdo, to arrive at an agreement. And see, that matches English pretty closely. So you shouldn't have any problem with that. Just remember the a. You're arriving to an agreement, okay? Los candidatos llegaron a un acuerdo. The candidates arrived at an agreement. Well, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And until next time, hasta luego.